Very excited to dive into our next conversation about scaling a business and maximizing operational efficiency. But before we get into the conversation, I wanted to say first, thank you so much to our sponsors, and specifically for this conversation, DV01, who is sponsoring this conference as a silver sponsor, and our other sponsors as well. And diving into some quick housekeeping, I want to say thank you to everyone who has made this possible, from our sponsors to our audience members to our speakers. None of this would be possible without you. And so I hope that you are enjoying and that you're excited for all the conversations that we have to come. And so if you're just joining us, I wanted to go over some quick housekeeping. Your camera and audio will remain on for the duration of the talk, but we would love to hear from you. So feel free to add a question or a comment in the chat, and you can also drop that for our speaker. So I'm going to do my best to get that over to the speaker. If you have any technical difficulties, please just tag myself or my colleague Paloma just to make sure we can help troubleshoot. If you're looking to earn SHRM credits from today's talk, you can just use the code on the screen to redeem those credits at the top left. And then we're going to drop the code of conduct in the chat just to make sure that this is a great experience for everyone involved. And so now I would love to introduce our speaker for today, who is Amy Johnson, who is the Chief Operating Officer for DV01, a company revolutionizing the mortgage and consumer lending markets through technology by creating actionable insight out of disparate data. DV01 offers the world's first end-to-end data management, reporting, and analytics platform with loan-level transparency, doing their part to prevent a repeat of 2008. As COO, she is responsible for sales and marketing, account management and reporting, data integrations, finance, and legal. In a nutshell, she is responsible for scaling the business and maximizing operational efficiency. Amy has worked in finance for 2 decades, having experienced 2 major financial cycles, the dot-com bubble, as well as the 2008 credit crisis, while rising up through the ranks in investment banking, credit trading, business management, and running a global sales team. She worked at some of the largest companies on Wall Street, including Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, and Deutsche, as well as Intercontinental Exchange, one of the largest exchanges, clearinghouses, and market data providers to Wall Street. She also found the time to launch her own startup, a fashion company, in the midst. Amy has a BS in actuarial science from the University of Illinois and an MBA in finance from Wharton. My name is Nicole. I will be moderating today's conversation, and I am the Associate Marketing Manager at Power to Fly. And I am really excited to be here. And let me just say, wow. I mean, clearly you're like awesome, right? But that's incredible that you've been able to do all of this. So I'm really excited to dive into today's conversation. I know that I gave an overview of DV01 in your bio and introduction, but I would love to learn more about you and your career journey so far beyond what's in your bio, right? Of course, getting to know a little bit more about you. And can you tell us about how the mission of DV01 and what your role as CEO plays in helping DV01 accomplish its mission? So that's a big question. But I think they tie really well together. So let's kick it off with you, and then we'll go to the second part.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you to Power to Fly for hosting this. I'm super excited to be here. So me and my background, I'll kind of tell you my story. I guess it's been a journey, and one that I'm super proud of, and also fun. It's been fun. So I started my career in investment banking at Merrill Lynch. I kind of tripped into the career, but I loved it. It was during the dot-com bubble, which was incredible, and actually, helped me in my job currently and where I am today. We were taking a lot of companies public, doing a lot of, road shows, valuing companies, doing M&A deals, private equity deals for these technology companies. And I absolutely loved it. I thought I was going to be a career investment banker. And, in investment banking, you work a lot of hours. So it's like 100-hour work weeks. And I really needed a break. So I decided to go to business school. I also thought that I was going to eventually be the CEO of an investment bank. I was so driven. So during my summer internship for investment banking, or for at business school, I thought, well, if I'm going to be the CEO of an investment bank, I'll try something different within an investment bank. So I had a sales and trading internship at Goldman Sachs, which was fantastic. And then, when you work at Goldman Sachs, it's really hard to kind of say no to a full-time offer. So I joined the investment grade cash and CDS trading desk at Goldman. And it was a phenomenal experience. Again, that was during the credit boom. So that was when, credit was the most sexy and popular thing to trade at the time. And I really had a great time there. I learned a lot. I was not a great trader. So I didn't like taking the risk home with me at night. So when my boss and the head of the desk left to go to Deutsche Bank to run the flow credit trading business at Deutsche Bank, and he said, "Why don't you come and be a business manager for me?" I was like, "I don't really know what that job is, but it sounds great." So I left with him. And that brought me to Deutsche Bank. And a business manager was really kind of a mini COO. And I ultimately worked my way from doing flow credit trading to covering most of the credit business, everything outside of ABS, asset-backed securities, and MBS, which is what I work in today. But it was a phenomenal experience because I was working there during the credit boom and then bust, the credit crisis, or the global financial crisis as we know it today. So when we were at Deutsche Bank, or when I was at Deutsche Bank, before the bust, we had made $2 billion. And then when everything fell apart, we lost $2 billion, and then the next year we made it back. So it was really quite something. Again, I was working like crazy hours, and because I had been a trader, I was responsible for, unwinding a lot of the risk that we had built up in our business. And then regulation kind of came into play with Dodd-Frank and the Volcker rule and all of these things. And I was getting really antsy and kind of felt like I was ready to run my own thing. And at the same time, on the trading floor, and this is something we'll kind of dive into later, you're really surrounded by all men. You don't see a lot of women on the trading floor. So there were 60 traders that I was responsible for in my role, but there's hundreds of traders on the trading floor, and there might be 10 women. But I kind of fancied myself a tastemaker, because guys would ask me what should I wear? What should I buy my wife? Where should I go for dinner? And especially on the what should I wear thing, I kind of got into that. I would go online and go onto different websites, and guys look great in their uniform. If they're wearing a suit, they look great, but come casual Fridays, it was a disaster, so I would kind of put some stuff together and send it, and they would just buy it, right? So as I was thinking about what I was going to do when I left Deutsche Bank, I at the same time, a site that I shopped on called Net-a-Porter, it was this, they kind of brought everything together. And while for men, that didn't really exist. So I felt well, I should create this. And Net-a-Porter had just sold to a private equity shop for 350 million pounds, which was a lot of money. And I was oh, I can get rich. I can do this idea. I'll execute. It'll be great. Everyone on the trading floor was do it. You're going to crush it. It'll be great. So I left and I started this business, and it was phenomenal. It was a great experience. I knew nothing about starting my own business or fashion, but it was great. And then ironically, Net-a-Porter started a brother company called Mr. Porter as I was launching mine. I had raised $1 million, and they had, the full backing of a private equity shop. So needless to say, after 3.5 years, it didn't quite work out. or 3 years. It didn't quite work out, but it was a phenomenal experience, and it really got my itch going for working at a startup. And I realized I love to grow companies, and that's why I ultimately am here at DVO1. But after that, I needed to replenish my bank account. So I went and worked at Intercontinental Exchange, which is, it marries finance and technology. It was a phenomenal experience. I ran a global sales team and learned so much. It took my my experience in the credit markets, and like I said, we were a global sales team, but we ran a credit execution trading screen. And that was a lot of technology building and innovating. And, I had, my clients were all of the old traders that I had worked with. So it was really great. But I had that itch to get back into a startup, and I knew I wanted to go somewhere that was like at the stage where they really needed, growth. I wanted to partner with someone. I didn't want to start my own business. So I was looking for, a CEO where, like Perry, our CEO, is phenomenal and we get along great. We balance each other out. But I wanted a Series A company that where I knew what I was doing. So I wanted to focus on capital markets, but have it be the right stage of growth, because I really wanted to help grow the business. So that's my story. And I love it at DVO1. It's fantastic.
I love your story for so many reasons. I mean, I always love a good success story. Who doesn't? Because it's inspiring. But I also love a good, I don't want to say failure, but when things don't turn out the way that we hoped, right? So building this business and things didn't work out. And I think it's so important to include that, because so many times, especially during these kinds of conferences and conversations, we see really accomplished people and it feels so out of range, right? Like you see someone, you're like, okay, that's great, and I'm listening to your advice, but I could never do that. So I really appreciate your transparency there and sharing your story. And I love where you talk about, honing in on what you wanted, right? Through all of these different lived experiences. And I think it's so important, because in this like growing world that we have, this growing economy, there's so many options out there, right? Even when it comes to like food choices. I now live in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and the supermarkets are way smaller. And so my choices are a lot more limited. And every time I go back to the US and I go to the supermarket, I'm like blown away, a little bit overwhelmed, almost like anxiety attack, right? Because I'm like, oh my God, I do not know how to make the choice here. And so in talking about your career journey and what you've done, I would love it if you could talk a little bit more about how you came to make those decisions about, honing in on what you liked versus what you didn't like. And I know obviously your career journey helped you make those decisions, but were there ever times throughout there where you sat down and said, okay, I'm going to make a list of what I really like versus what I don't really like? Because also in the day to day, it can kind of feel maybe a little bit overwhelming to hone in a little bit more and get more specific about what we want.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like I said, like I loved investment banking. Like I loved, I was a math major, like actuarial science is basically a math major. I've always been like very detail oriented, and analytical, and I like being involved in detail. And I liked that about investment banking. You have to be like really into the numbers. And going into like a trading seat, again, it's like numbers oriented, but I liked the chaos. I like the chaos of the trading floor. Like I always have liked that. And going into Deutsche Bank, like having a million problems to solve at the same time. Like I loved going like the credit boom. Like I loved the ups, but I loved the down as well. I liked solving problems. So I always knew like I'm a problem solver. And then when I started my own business, that was just like, you have to learn how to like turn on like get the power on, or like go and buy office furniture. I mean, things that you never think that you have to do, let alone like fly to Italy and convince people to sell you like designer clothes when you only have like a sheet of paper that says like, this is what my website is going to look like. Nothing's been built yet. You know what I mean? And so like, there were a lot of things that I knew I liked, and I like, but I like the most, I like solving problems. And I know I'm an operator. Like I know I'm well organized. I'm analytical. But when it comes to, being a CEO, like where Perry is really good, like he is really good at like rallying our company around a mission. Like he's really, like, I can't really describe it. He's just excellent. Like we balance each other because he's like such a visionary and I'm like an executor. I'm not saying that he's not an executor, but he's just better at that. You know what I mean? And I'm like really good at kind of like executing and getting the job done. And I'm also really good in something I love is like growing leaders and growing managers and growing people underneath me to like be as good as me and like take me over someday. So like then I can be like better and better. So that's something I love. I love growing and fostering people. So what do I like? What don't I like? Like maybe I think Perry's like better at being in the spotlight than me, and that's okay. You know what I mean? And I love working with Perry. You know what I mean? So we just balance each other out. And I think what I know is I like solving problems and I like being an operator. And so that's how I figured out that this is the right role for me. I also, though, in my job, I get to still do the finance side. And I love that. Like I love numbers. So, I kind of still serve as like CFO because we don't have one. I have like a killer finance team and they're doing most of it, but I still kind of get to play that role. And I love that. So secretly, like I still get to be in the numbers a lot.
Well, now it's not so secret. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I love that you shared this though, because I think it's so important when we talk about moving into a new company or defining what we like, knowing where we sort of thrive, right? And there's like that quote from Modern Family that always rings true and comes back up in my mind about when they're talking about somebody being like, flying in the clouds and somebody being back on the ground and how the two need to come together because it just makes things work. And so it sounds like you and Perry are kind of that relationship, visionary and executor. And not that both of you don't have those set of skills, but together you really like level each other out.
Yeah.
To build a successful business. And so I love this. So thank you for sharing. So can you tell us more about the mission of DV01 and what your role as CEO plays in helping DV01 accomplish its mission through all of the things that you're managing?
Sure. So our mission is to bring unparalleled transparency and intelligence to every loan for every stakeholder. And what does that mean? So we basically are lifting the curtain for the largest financial market in the world. Structured credit is a $16 trillion market. So like, what is structured credit, right? It's basically the backbone for everyday consumer activities that empower financial freedom. So if you think about like you and me, like what do we do? What do we need like finance for, right? It's kind of like this big concept. But if you think about like everything we do in our daily lives, like we consolidate credit card debt, we refinance student loans, like we borrow money to buy a house, we borrow money to start a small business. And so these are like everyday activities. And sorry about that. But with these everyday activities, like they end up, if you haven't seen The Big Short, highly recommend it. It's an entertaining film, and it also really helps to understand what is structured credit. But through these everyday activities, they end up these loans end up being like sold to investors or originated into securitizations. And they're concepts that sound really like hard to understand, but they are pretty simple. And the credit crisis happened for a lot of reasons, right? But one thing that was very glaring, and one thing, Perry used to be a mortgage bond trader, was that there was a lack of transparency. And so what DV01 is providing is that transparency. And we provide loan level data to, capital markets participants in this ecosystem. So we're like lifting the curtain on this loan level data that really wasn't there before. So you can actually drill down and see what is the performance of these loans, whether an investor owns like the whole loans or if they own securitizations. We provide analytical tools on top of this data, and in a nutshell, helping to prevent another repeat of the 2008 global financial crisis. I hope that makes sense. I know there's a lot buried in there, but I promise if you watch The Big Short, it'll resonate more.
Beyond helping to understand a little bit more, The Big Short is just a great movie with some fantastic actors. So
yes.
Really, really recommend it. I really love that movie. And I think this is so important when we talk about transparency in loans, right? Because I mean, as you're saying, loans affect all of us, whether it's a mortgage, student loans, me personally, student loans, and all of this stuff that we don't know. It's so helpful to have that kind of level playing field. And so thank you for sharing that and trying to make it as easy to understand as possible. Although sometimes from the outside, it feels like a little bit overwhelming.
I know,
with all the lingo.
Exactly.
Yeah. It almost feels like it's constructed to be that way so that you don't ask questions. It's like, oh, here, just sign on the dotted line. Here are all these like terms and all of these things. It's like when you sign up for something, it's like the terms and conditions, and come on, whoever really reads it. But it's important to like read these things and get a better understanding.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. I think that it's just, I think as consumers, we need to be smart about, obviously, like, what are we doing? We're borrowing money. I think that the way DV01 got started was really in 2013, 2014. Some of these online lenders, they really kind of revolutionized the way that we as consumers could borrow, and it was online, right? So they took it from this like legacy, like old school systems and way to borrow money to like, oh, you can borrow money, by going to a website. And that made it a lot easier to access, money, but also kind of more transparent as well. And that's DV01 got its start because data was available, and we could take that data and provide it in a web app to investors who are buying these loans, right? Whereas like the mortgage market is so legacy, there wasn't a lot of transparency. And now since, starting in online, when we were founded to now, 6 years later, 6.5 years later, now we finally have mortgages on the platform. We have credit cards, we have autos. So we've gotten some of those legacy markets onto the platform, but we got our start in online lending, which is much more forward, I don't want to say revolutionary, but kind of, I'm lost for words. It's just, it's a smarter and easier way for the borrower.
And definitely disrupting the industry, right?
Yes,
and
that's exactly the word I was looking for. Thank you.
I love when that happens. Perfect. And so can you talk about, I mean, we don't have too much time left, so I'd love to sort of finish out here.
Sure.
So are there lessons that you learned through the dot-com bubble, through, the last global financial crisis that lead into now? And how do those lessons play a role in what's to come when it comes to
really from the dot-com bubble, I feel like there was so much hype, and people lost track of fundamentals. And I think that was the main takeaway from that, right? It was like, oh, there's Amazon, which was, Amazon, but then there's like pets.com. There were these things that just like didn't make sense, right? And you really have to look at the fundamentals of a business to say, like, do they have a solid revenue or proven revenue? Do they have like growth insight? What is their cash flow? Is there a cash flow? And what's their burn, right? What's their business plan? Like, look at it, right? And if I look at like the global financial crisis, I think that that was masked, right? Like, I feel like there was a lot of like kind of lack of communication almost, but like, how could we have known? So it was kind of masked. And now after the fact, through regulation and through the transparency that we're providing at DV01, we're unmasking that, right? Like, we're providing transparency so that you can see, okay, what's in these structured credit, what's in the securitization, what does the loan level detail tell us? How are the consumers performing? Are they prepaying? Are they defaulting? Are they delinquent? What's going on, right? So unmasking what's there, and I think that's important. But then you see other things that are really hyped right now, and I think you just have to question, do these things make sense, right? There's SPACs. That's a big hype thing. I don't know how much people know about SPACs, but these special purpose vehicles, that to me seems really hyped right now. And so I think people need to educate themselves. Crypto right now is awesome. It's excellent. I'm so happy for my friends who've done really well in that space, but it's also, is it hyped, right? We all have to think about these things. So I think that anytime there seems to like feel like momentum building around something, or is it too fast, like, we just have to stop and like look at fundamentals. So DV01 provides that transparency and the ability for people to really dig into the fundamentals. And that's why I love working here, because even though we're a for-profit company, I do feel like there's a mission-based element to it.
Who doesn't love working for a mission-based company? It makes every day so much easier. But I really love that you say that, because it's so true. It's almost, these things seem too good to be true, right? Especially when we talked about cryptocurrencies. It's kind of where I'm most familiar at this time. And now people are going to have to look up the SPACs. But it's so true. And it's also so enticing, right? Which makes it almost more like dangerous and a little bit more volatile, because then everybody wants to get onto it. And how, oh my gosh, it's a dangerous cycle, right? Well, Amy, I know we have just 1 minute left, but I wanted to give you a chance to let people know how they can keep up with you. I know we've been dropping links to DV01 in the chat, but I wanted to see if how we can keep up with you and how we can support you.
Oh, well, thank you. I think the best thing to do is to follow DV01 on LinkedIn. We have a great presence there. We, also our blog on our website. Please check out our job postings. Leo, our recruiter, if he hits you up, please respond. He's awesome. We are definitely looking to recruit in we want more diversity. And we didn't get to that topic, but I'm a huge advocate for diversity at DV01. And so we're looking for more of that. And we'd love to see you applying for our open job positions. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, please do that. And yeah, definitely keep in touch with us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amy. And sorry we didn't get the chance to get to the diversity questions. These 30 minutes go by so fast. And there's so much to dive into.
Wow, it's crazy.
You think 30 minutes, oh my gosh, that's like a long time. But then once you get into the meat and peas, it goes so fast. But thank
Yeah.
you so much for being here. And we will drop your LinkedIn in the chat so people can follow up and learn more about diversity efforts at DVO1 and learn about this incredible company. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have had the honor to moderate this conversation.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.